Good afternoon and welcome back to Chief Data Officer Europe 2017. My name's Adam Plom from Corinium Intelligence, and I'm now joined by three of our speakers from this morning's sessions. Carruthers, the Chief Data Officer for Network Rail, Gary Goldberg, the Chief Data Officer from Mizuho International, and also Peter Jackson, the Head of Data from the Pensions Regulator. Welcome everybody. So based on this morning's discussions, we know this has been a really important topic, so let's just jump straight into it and really share how you structured a CDO role effectively within your own organisation.
I think it's about who you have around you and making sure you've got the kind of support that you need, because one person can't fix this. We had a conversation earlier on about being careful with the Chief Data Officer role, because the instant an organisation creates it, there is the tendency to go, it's your problem, and it isn't. It's absolutely everybody's problem, and everybody has to do something to help the data and nurture it and look after it. So we've very much gone for a multi-hub and spoke model within the organisation, a very small central team and lots of little guiding lights that link into that focus through the organisation, taking it closer to the people who actually need our help.
Gary, is that the same for you as well?
So very similar to what was said about Network Rail. We've tried to keep the data office as small as possible to focus on the added value to the organisation, but ownership actually rests with each department. Within the data office itself, though, I've got what I call 4 pillars. I've got a change function, which is for all of our regulatory projects and change programs. But fundamentally, I have what I call data management and data governance. Data management is all about my current state. It's about how good the data is, where the data sits. I don't want to say acting as a librarian because that would kind of do a disservice, but it's acting as a repository of information. If somebody wants to know where information's held, that's where you go. And they monitor the quality, they govern the KPIs. Data governance is then about where we want to be. It's our target state, it's our strategy, our policy, and the project teams you can almost think of as taking us from current state to that target state. And then we have a data maintenance function, which for certain corporate enterprise data, the data office actually maintains that on behalf of the organisation.
Peter, from your perspective as a regulator, is that the same case?
Very similarly to the other two. A small central data office, and we have governance, we have management, but I think the other feature we have, it might be slightly different, is business engagement. We have somebody in the data team who's engaged closely to the business, who understands pensions policy and how the pension landscape works, and they interact with the data team.
So feeding off that then, one of the large components of the Chief Data Officer role is obviously change. So how do you identify and overcome common obstacles to data-driven change?
The most effective way of overcoming the obstacle is through passion and a vision. You have to sell the vision of the strategy. And you have to put the narrative around it, you have to show the business the benefit of the strategy, and then some of those obstacles start to melt away. And you can then actually tackle the real obstacles, such as the technology and the people and the skills.
Gary, I know we spoke this morning about people who don't understand what you're talking about and perhaps don't want to understand what you're talking about. How do you overcome those?
Well, part of the job of a CDO is to make it relevant to the business, is to take that vision and to sell it. If I have to start speaking in data architecture terms to senior management, I've already lost. So it's about understanding the business flows and the process flows, and helping to make it real. We're fixing this data not because we love fixing data, but because doing that will help them do something else better. And that's the sell to the business. And then delivering that. And when they start seeing the improvements, and it's incremental and it takes time, but when they see it, they desperately want more because they can see what they've been lacking.
Caroline, is that the same from your perspective?
I think you can't beat talking to people. So I completely agree, you have to create that vision, you have to have something that you can talk to them about and you can enable them to want and to get that passion. But if they're having an issue with it, if there's something underlying that, so you just can't beat sitting down, having a one-on-one conversation and trying to get to the root of the problem.
And sorry, if I can add, the other issue with, well, not issue I guess, but the other dynamic with change and making it real to the business is that data is intrinsically linked to the business processes. And that's the other avenue that as a CDO and the data office that we use to make it real. Data is usually wrong because a business process is broken. And we are a part of the organization that facilitates business process improvement. And we're helping each department to make their lives a little bit easier. And selling that goes a long way because we start solving real problems for the organization.
It's interesting you raised that point. One of the things we often talk about is how do you align your data and analytics strategy with your executive team's goals, aspirations and targets?
Well, the very first thing you have to do is make sure you've got one. So, making sure that you have your business strategy, that you understand it. Feel free to ask lots of questions at this point because it should be something that you can repeat virtually verbatim back to people. And then it's about looking at how the information flows enable that to take place. So it's not what you need now, it's what you need in the future and how you're going to help that business journey take you there.
Gary, your perspective?
Caroline's absolutely right. It all starts with the business strategy. Our job in the data office is to help enable the business to achieve its goals. We can suggest, and part of our journey towards innovation is using insights in the data to suggest new opportunities, but it all originates with the business strategy. And that's why I think having the conversation in business terms goes a long way. Fundamentally, the business wants to find new revenue streams and they want to keep costs down. I think every business is universally the same. And there's a huge number of opportunities in any data organization to support either of those ends.
And Peter, your perspective on this, I know that obviously in your role perhaps you're not looking at different revenue streams, but how do you tackle that in your organisation?
You have to go and seek out the business objectives. The data strategy has to be absolutely hooked into the KPIs of the business, perhaps in government department, the business objectives, the corporate plan, so where we went to find out what our goals were, what we would hook onto. And then we took the approach of doing several proofs of concept to actually show the business what value we could bring to those business objectives.
One of the things we often talk about is the support beneath the Chief Data Office for your work. But how important is it to have the support of your executive team? How do you maintain that? How does that play out?
It's totally fundamental. You have to have a very senior sponsor who's right behind what you're doing because it is a transformational activity that you're taking on. You're delving your fingers and your influence right across the business. You're going to change business processes. You're going to take a new approach to how you treat data, how you look after it. You'll influence technology. So having a senior sponsor is vital.
I'd agree. You need senior sponsorship. In fact, I'd suggest you need multiple senior sponsors. You need the entire or the majority of the senior team to be on board because it's in their departments that you're going to be instigating change. And without their buy-in, the next level down and the mid-level management won't deliver.
To just pick up on that point for a second, I think that's absolutely right because data does not sit in silos. Mm-hmm. So unlike other C-suite roles where they focus on their particular area, our role is about looking at the end-to-end processes and that cuts right through the whole organisation. So if you're going to meddle in somebody's garden, you really better make sure that you talk to them first.
Absolutely. And that is one of the really interesting things about the data office and the CDO role is that we're in a unique position where we do span the organization. We touch on everything. And while it has a lot of benefits, it has a lot of political hurdles that you can, in landmines, that you can easily step on. So being having that buy-in and being very cognizant of the conversations that you need to have are oh so important. It just doesn't work otherwise.
One of the things we often talk about at our events, and I'm sure this one as well, is talent and whether there is a data talent shortage. My question to you is, one, is there? And two, how do you overcome it?
I think that we are struggling with specific roles in this area to try and get more. I do think that we're maybe not casting our net wide enough. So you talked about librarians, for instance, earlier on. Well, they're information managers.
They are.
So, they've been doing it for a very, very long time. Why can't we learn from that part of the industry? Why don't we utilise skills that possibly we haven't been traditionally looking at in the past? So I think that we have opportunities to actually bring some different silos together and build on it.
I think there are particular shortages, but I don't think it's specific to data or data science. I think the skill set that I need primarily are problem solvers. I need people who don't just follow a routine and execute. I need people who can question and who can have the conversation about my 2 magic questions to life. Why and so what? Why are you doing it? So what happens if you don't? But having people who can answer that and ask those questions in a dynamic way, who can take the conversation with the business forward, that's the hard problem. And you're right, we have to find alternative sources and places we haven't thought of. And a lot of what we're doing is building that up. Even with the data stewards and people throughout the organization that we rely on, it's an education. It's all new. I mean, we talked earlier about data is something that they don't always get. They don't know what to think of it. So we're having to train them. And I think that's part of the role of the CDO, is to bring that education and to create that pool of talent.
I totally agree. I think that, just to add on to that, I think that the real skill, something we spoke about earlier on, was mixing that business understanding with the data understanding. Yes. Where you find that talent, I think homegrown is a good approach because they will understand the business. So then teaching them the data skills is really the easy part. And we've started a data academy internally to actually engender those skills within our own resource.
Yeah, and we're looking towards graduate recruitment, etc., so that we can almost use the word indoctrinate, but for lack of a better word, bring people into the way of thinking to understand those flows and how to do it right before they have a legacy of experience elsewhere about how to do it wrong.
So Gary, how important would you say external partnerships are? For example, partnerships with universities?
I think very important. I'm actively working on building those partnerships. It's a difficult one to do because the universities who are engaged in those partnerships have specific projects that they try to do, and it's not always aligned, but very much trying to build those out because I think it's for our long-term benefit.
I think we discussed earlier about we're pioneers in this. There's not many of us currently, so I wouldn't say that we're cowboys, but we're definitely leading the vanguard in a lot of this thing. I think we have an obligation and a duty to make sure that we can encourage youngsters and young people to actually come into this area and know what it is they get themselves into.
Yeah.
Okay, so one final question then, and I know we've touched on this already this morning, but if you were to offer one piece of advice to an aspiring Chief Data Officer, what would it be?
Whether you're just starting on a career ladder or working as a Chief Data Officer now, just keep it simple. We have too many people trying to make it sound complicated when it's not.
I would so agree with that. And I'd also say then to keep an idea and always a focus on where the value is. What is you're doing? What is it you're doing? You're not solving data problems or creating data architectural concepts for some standalone purpose. It's to add value to the business. Keeping it simple for the business focus will get you a long, long way.
I think I would add to both of those. A third layer, articulating that with passion and vision, being able to describe the vision of the journey to people.
Caroline, Gary, Peter, it's been fascinating. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the event.